I was really interested in this idea of like self-sustainability and being self-sufficient and growing food and being connected with the food that I was eating. There's such a disconnect between the food we eat and how it's grown.
Hello and welcome to the Regenerative Design Podcast. I'm your host, Mathieu Mehuis, and in this show, I interview the leading authorities in the world of regenerative practices, people who do good and do well. Are you a person that cares about your environment and our planet? Are you a person that wants to leave the planet to our children to be something that we can be truly proud of? Something to enjoy for many generations to come. But are you also a person that believes we can do all of this and do good in business? Well, I have really good news for you. You're here listening to the podcast that is all about making our planet a better place and making your business more successful. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Regenerative Design Podcast with your host Mathieu Mehuis. And today we have another amazing guest. His name is Justin A.H. Snyder, and he's the founder of Forest Superfoods from Australia. And I'm super excited to have Justin on the show because he's built a big brand with new supplements that are both good for the environment and are good for your personal health. So Justin, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Matthew. I'm excited as well.
Yes, so we'll dive in immediately. I'd love to hear your backstory. Like, where did everything start? Were you already working with mushrooms as a child? Because most of your supplements are related to mushrooms.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
So I came from a long list of business owners. Like my great grandfather had his own general store in Poland, and my grandfather had a jewelry store in Melbourne, and I used to spend my weekends going and helping him in the store, and I loved the business. I always was fascinated by this idea of being able to like converse with people and build a business and build relationships with people and give people something that they really appreciated. And so business is kind of like, you could say it's in my blood, but I always wanted to go into business from when I was very young. So I studied accounting and economics at school and in university. And when I was in high school, I started my first business, and I was selling these like little gel plastic CD cases and stuff. They were awful. And I ended up throwing out most of them. But like, you have to fail you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. So that one was a big fail. And then I started another one where I was doing this thing. I still have this business. It's called Happy Cow. And it does like leather bags, like hip bags, like from the festivals and stuff. Like if you ever go to Boom Festival in Portugal and like those kind of festivals, everyone's got these bags where they can like carry everything with hands free. So you can dance, but carry your things. So I started business doing those, but doing like high quality handmade leather ones. And it did pretty good. But like I was always looking for something else where there was like a lot of demand, like this kind of business. It was only for people that went to like the hippie festivals. It's a very small market. And so I spent a lot of years traveling around India when I was like 20, 19, 21. And in India,
where were you?
Everywhere. Like I went everywhere. I went from like the very south to like the very north. Like,
nice.
I spent a lot of time in India. And in India, I think there's the Ayurvedic medicine. So there's this whole idea of like food and medicine combine with each other. They use plants as a way of healing and a way of being more healthy, like all humans did before pharmaceuticals. It was just normal. And so when I was in India, I discovered spirulina, and I was really amazed by it. And I was vegetarian at the time, and I love this idea of having like that I could eat this food which was super high in iron and B vitamins and protein, and like didn't have to have an animal source. And I became fascinated by this idea of like these foods that could change your life for the better and make you more healthy and improve different parts of your life. And it kind of stayed with me in the back of my head. And then when I think I was about 27, 28, my best friend, he hated his job. He was working in like corporate mining company, like destroying his soul was the way he described it. I said to him, I've got this idea for a business if you want to start it with me. And it was great because he was very much about like he was the creative type, very much about graphic design and creativity and making things beautiful. And I was very much about like the numbers and logical and planning and all that kind of stuff. So together we worked pretty good for a couple of years.
Wow.
Um, and so we had this. So I had this idea to start this business, and so we started it, and we had no money, so we just did everything ourselves. So I learned how to web design for the Happy Cow business, and we did the marketing, and we did the packaging design, and we did the sourcing of the products, and everything we just did ourselves because we couldn't afford to hire anybody. And so we
Wow.
we started the business, and we called it Cheap Superfoods, because the idea was there was like a couple of other superfood companies that were very expensive, but there was only maybe two, and they were super expensive. So we thought we'd start one called Cheap Superfoods and undercut them. But the problem was we were selling the highest quality stuff. So it was all like certified organic and Australian grown and without fillers and no like alcohol extraction or it was all like super high quality stuff because I thought I don't want to sell rubbish, like I didn't want to be selling people crap, and so I wanted to sell the highest quality stuff, but calling it cheap superfoods, there was this disconnect between like the name of the business and what we're actually doing. And so one day I turned to him and I said, "How do you feel about the name Cheap Superfoods?" And he said, "I hate it. How do you feel?" And I said, "I feel embarrassed telling people about it." So we changed it. So we changed it to Forest Superfoods. And Forest Superfoods made sense because we were donating money to like protect endangered rainforest. And we were also, a lot of the products come from the forest. So it all fits in together, and
Oh
it's all
yeah.
like plant-based whole foods. And so like the idea of Forest Superfoods worked really good. And once we changed the name, I think I became much more passionate about the business. He kind of
Wow.
lost interest and disappeared, but I kind of like became much more interested and much more enthusiastic about the business. And I think it kind of resonated much more with the audience as well. And so things started to work much better. But for like, I heard this quote the other day that you have to be, to start your own business, you have to be a bit of a psychopath because it takes 20 years,
I
well,
agree.
for me it took 20 years to get to the stage where I'm at now, from like when I started my first business to actually like making good money. And
Yeah.
most people would go like, I can't be bothered doing this anymore, I'm just going to go get a job and do something else. But like I was really, I guess for me, I wasn't scared of the business failing. To me, what was more of a scary idea was getting a job that didn't mean anything to me and spending my life doing something that it meant nothing to me, giving up all my time and making a little bit of money in exchange for my time, which is really the only valuable thing we have, right? The time's
Yes,
the
I
only, the time's the only valuable thing. And
yeah.
so I think it's really important to like spend your time in a way that you think is valuable, because you want to, if you drop dead tomorrow, you want to be able to say like, I lived the life the best I could. You don't want to, I think it's so sad when people get to like 60 or 70 or 80 and they feel like they've wasted their life, like that's a tragedy. I think you have to live life the way you want to live it, and get the most out of it, and value the time, because it's the only thing that that you can't get back.
No, I fully agree with you, Justin. And I think you said something very interesting about, well, it's quite extreme, but I think it's true in a way that you have to be a psychopath to do this entrepreneurial journey. And yeah, even for me, it's like it's not easy. It's like you have really difficult moments. Uh, you have financial instability at the
Yeah.
beginning. There's like so many risks involved. You have to like do everything yourself. You have to wear all kinds of hats. You have to wear the sales hat, then you have to wear the delivery hat and do everything. So
Yes.
I think it's very beautiful and honest to tell that it's not an overnight success,
No, I
even
think
though
there was
for many people it will look like it, because now
exactly.
you have this brand and it's like, oh wow, you just created that,
Yeah,
amazing.
you got lucky. No, I think it was like 4 or 5 years of paying myself $100 or $200 a week, and like never having any money. So like, a supplier would call and say your invoice is late, and I'd be like, okay, I'm paying it tomorrow, and then I'd have to delay someone else, and like just try, because we've never taken $1 from outside. There's never
Oh,
been any loans, no debt. I own 100% of the equity. There's never been anything taken from outside, because I don't want to owe anybody, and I don't
oh,
want to feel like I have to. Someone else can tell me what to do, not tell me what to do, but someone else can be part of the decision making. Like for example, if we can't get like a high, if we're like we all our mushrooms are grown in Australia, so we grow them all here. So like
Mm.
imagine a situation which has happened before when we sell out of all the mushrooms, and then there's a temptation to buy cheap quality mushrooms that are
Yes.
imported from China. And
Yeah,
if
I
I have
agree.
someone else who's involved in the business, now I need to work with them to explain, no, no, I don't want to sell this rubbish. It's not good for our reputation. It's not, I don't feel comfortable. But if I just own everything, I don't have to talk to anybody. I can just go, you know
No.
what, mushrooms are sold out till we get more. So there's
It's
like that independence that comes from owning 100%.
Yes, it's a very, very interesting topic. Looking at the fact that you have created 40 million in revenue or in sales, which is the same in essence, but that you created that in as long as the company is existing, and that you've done that without external equity is quite amazing. And I agree with you. Like, you keep your independency, because I've heard a number of stories where people say, like, they do a startup, they get equity in, it all
Yeah.
sounds great and amazing, and they're going to support you, but actually they already come in with the equity comes in with the wrong intention. They'll be like, they promise you a whole bunch of stuff, like, we're going to
Yes.
help you, management team, this, that,
Yeah.
and then they get in, they put in their equity, and they don't do anything on
And you
purpose.
and you can't
And
get
then
rid of
they're
them.
like, oh, okay, and you kind of start leaning back a little bit, and you
Yeah.
start depending on them, and they
Yeah.
do and they purposefully don't do anything because they want to completely buy you out at a
Mm.
low price, and that's very unfortunate, because it's like your baby, and then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you're forced to sell it, or they come in and they yeah, they want to increase the profit margin, so they will
Exactly.
either cut costs and lower the quality, so they
Yeah.
can have a bigger margin, and then you
Exactly.
lose your soul of your brand, which I can clearly see your brand has this really strong soul, I would say, because it's really honest. It looks amazing. The branding is great. You're super passionate about it, so we don't see that often. So yeah,
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
What you were saying before about like look like an overnight success, I think Jack Dorsey, who started Twitter, he
Yeah.
said like 10 years of hard work, perseverance, and failure will make you look like an overnight success.
I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good quote.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me, like, what you're doing and how you did it is like, one of my mentors has this quote. Well, we say you have to go the extra mile to be successful, and he kind of turns it around. He says, "There's no traffic on the extra mile. So when you persist and you keep going, and like less and less and less people will be your competitors.
Mm.
So even though probably you're still in a very competitive industry, because it's been growing a lot.
Yes.
So I'm just very curious to talk a bit more about why you decided to, which is amazing, by the way. You spent for every order there is, you spend $1 on nature conservation in Australia. Can you
Yes.
talk a bit more about it and why you decided to do that?
So, there's a place called the Daintree Rainforest in Australia, which is near the Great Barrier Reef, which has got is one of the, I think there's one or two other places in the world that has got ancient rainforest from 100,000 years ago, and the
Wow.
Daintree is one of them. So it's this incredible natural place with like cassowaries, which are these weird kind of ostriches with like bones, these big bones on their head, and like it's just it's the jungle like it was 100. There's plants there that were existing when the dinosaurs existed.
Wow.
Like it's crazy, and so I always kind of felt like I wanted to make sure that the business gave something back. It wasn't just about like making profit and giving people products they really liked, but it was also about making the world a better place. And so I was thinking a lot about how to do this, and I discovered this company called Rainforest Rescue in Australia, which is a not-for-profit company. And what they do is they will buy up sections of the Daintree rainforest and change the title on the land so it becomes it's owned by an environmental trust, so a
Oh,
conservation trust, so it can never be developed. No one can ever
wow.
buy it and put houses there or put a freeway there or knock down the rainforest or whatever. It's designated as like environmental protection forever.
Wow.
So we give them $1 from every order, so it's like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. and it's because and so we've saved thousands and thousands of acres of rainforest, and then also they will buy. So we'll work with them to buy some land and say it's like 10,000 acres, and some of it might already be cleared. So what they'll do is they'll replant the rainforest in that area that's been cleared, and then lock the whole thing up so that it can never be developed. So
Wow,
yeah, it's
amazing.
a really cool, it's really cool, and it's yeah, they're amazing. We've been working with them, I think, for like 8 years or something now.
Well, that's amazing because yeah, I saw on your website you've already have 150,000 acres that you
It's
were able to
crazy.
put in conservation, and that's congratulations. That's
Thank you.
you talk about leaving an impact or leaving a legacy. That's it. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a way to really make a difference. And like, there's the rainforest is the lungs of the planet. Without the rainforest and the Amazon and Australia and everywhere else, like humans don't survive and the planet doesn't survive. Like and to protect like ancient rainforest is so important, because even if you just do rainforest regeneration and replant the rainforest, it takes hundreds or thousands of years to be able to sequester the amount of carbon that these ancient rainforests do now. So if we could just protect them, that's way better than replanting new rainforest.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, that's a very smart way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And then yeah, we talked about it already offline, but it reminds me of your uh, well, world famous countryman Steve Irwin. If people know about conservation and a lot of nature development, then you'll clearly know Steve Irwin. And if you haven't, then you should go on YouTube and watch some of his interviews. They're so epic
Yeah, he
and
was the
very
best.
inspiring. And
And
he,
yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, he also really shows how important it is to have passion and enthusiasm for what you do.
Yeah,
That's
really.
why he became so popular around the world, was because he had so much enthusiasm and so much passion for what he did that it resonated with people. And
Mm.
before him, like, environmental kind of environmental celebrities were pretty boring. Like they talk very monotone and talk very quietly and very like kind of boring. And he's this exciting, like over the top, crazy Australian who's like
Yeah,
passionate, jumping on the back of like the snake and like, yeah, is Steve Irwin was a really good lesson in like the magic of having enthusiasm for what you do.
I agree. And then I still remember one of his one of the interviews that stuck the most with me is that he's saying like um, something around money. He says like he's like an interviewer is asking him, so I see you have a business and da da da. You're
Yeah,
making quite a lot of money, and he says like, yeah, you know what? I cannot make enough money, and you know why? Because I'm gonna put everything into conservation, and I'm gonna make and like it's so contagious, and I like it because it also sets the stage for I think maybe even a new age way of looking at protecting nature, restoring nature is like, okay, we don't necessarily have to depend on non-profits and the government, which
yeah,
still we don't have to like say that they're useless. That's the wrong way of putting it.
yes,
But it's also a little bit risky. Like it's a non-profit when they have financial problems, they have to like close their doors, or if funding stops. Same with the government when we have like a world that is now it's like a world where we're heading into more war, so they want to spend a lot of money on war, and nature is like the last thing that is our concern, it seems
yeah.
like. So then businesses like yours are way more stable to provide to have more and more protected areas.
Well, and yeah, and this relationship between human beings and nature is something that I think about a lot. And I think up until very recently, humans were all about conquering nature and controlling nature. And I think now we've become a little bit smarter as a species and realize that we can't control nature and that we're much better off working with nature. And even like in my own business, I see this a lot. So all our competitors sell mushroom extracts. So they
Mm.
take the mushroom and they soak it in water, and they soak in water or alcohol or both, throw away the mushroom and just sell the alcohol or the water. That's an extract, right? That's 99% of all mushroom products in the world. That's what it is. It's
Wow.
mostly alcohol. And but like this seems so weird to me because like you talk about how amazing these mushrooms are, how they can do all these incredible things for your brain and your gut health and your immune system and everything, but it doesn't work without alcohol. Like it doesn't make sense, like.
Mhm.
So what we do is we take the whole mushroom and freeze dry it and put it in capsules.
Well,
It's
very
like it's a
simple.
completely different thing. But when you put it with the alcohol, now you have a product which you can patent. Now you have a proprietary product which you can
Ah,
control, and you can and so that's why I think that's what happened 150 years ago. There was no pharmaceuticals. Like, pharmaceutical industry started early 1900s. That's when it started. And I
mhm.
think what they did is they saw, well, there's all these amazing plants that a medicine that can help to heal people and make people better and fix their immune system and whatever else, but we can't make any money off that. But what we can do is we could take the plant and we can pull out a certain compound, or we can put it in alcohol and extract certain elements of it, or if we could change it in some way. Now we've got a proprietary product that we can sell, and it becomes a business.
Huh.
And in order to make that work well, they had to discredit all of the plant medicine. So, like, it became witchcraft and like
Oh yeah.
humbo jumbo, and they took over the universities and talked about pharmaceuticals and synthetic ingredients and all this kind of thing. And pharmaceuticals became like the dominant thing. But I think now human beings are going, I think most of us have had like a bad experience. Like, I think Western medicine's amazing and there's lots of good things to it, but I think lots of us have also seen that there's some strange things happening with it as well. Like I remember once I had this rash on all of a sudden I got this rash on my arm, and so I went to the doctor and I said, what's going on? He says, I don't know, but now you have to put cortisol cream on it for the rest of your life. And I said, but it came from nowhere. Like, there has to be a reason. And he's like, here's a prescription for the cream. I've got someone else to see. And like, that was a big moment for me, because I went, oh, the doctors don't have all the answers all the time. And
Mhm.
like, sometimes, so I think there's a place. I think what's happening now is people are using this, what we call in Australia, integrated medicine. So you
Mm.
have, like, sometimes you need Western medicine. You have an
Yeah.
infection in your leg, you need antibiotics.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like, sometimes, it's much better. There's a plant that can help to make you better or help to improve your health, that doesn't have the side effects that a lot of these pharmaceutical products do have. And a lot of people find they get onto a pharmaceutical for their heart, which thins their blood, and then they need something else to stop the blood from coming out every time they get a cut, and then they need something else to do with that. And like, it's this like snowball effect. But like, if you could just add a food to your diet, there's very little, if any, side effects from that. And so I think the reason why my business has become so popular and the whole industry has exploded is because people are wanting to be more healthy, and they're wanting to improve their lives, and they're seeing that there's these amazing foods out there that can do that. People who have brain fog and can't concentrate and can't get their work done, and they take lion's mane, and they feel like the brain fog clears away and they can focus and they can think clearly. Like, that's just a mushroom, without any really known side effects and any issues. You don't have to take Ritalin or these, which is speed, really. Like, all these drugs that are pharmaceutical drugs that are there to like improve your concentration, they give to the kids with ADHD and stuff. It's speed, it's amphetamines, and there's all
Yeah.
kinds of side effects from that, and issues that come from taking that. Whereas lion's mane, there's nothing. It's for as far as I know, there's nothing. And so I think people are starting to wake up to the plant medicine, as much of a loaded term that is, but waking up to this idea that there's like that nature can really help to improve them and make their lives better and improve their health. And it's just getting more and more popular all the time.
It's beautiful the way you put it, in the sense of like also a little bit demystifying all the like you said, plant medicine. Has quite a heavy word, and for many people still it's like a witchcraft, which
Yeah,
and as it seems the pharmaceuticals kind of it worked. What they wanted to do is to
yeah,
kind of, and there's been like a lot of, I read about it, that a lot of natural ways of healing became like forbidden and all that stuff,
yes,
but it's
yes.
clearly coming back. And then I have to say, like, you've been doing this for over 10 years. What were like some of, like, it's interesting to know for other people like myself starting the, well, in the beginning of the into growing a business,
Yes.
Like, what were some of your biggest challenges, and how were you able to overcome them? Because it sounds like you went up against the big pharma in a way. Like, probably not at the beginning, but it yeah, it
Yeah,
wasn't an easy road, I assume.
I think big pharma is definitely threatened by the natural health industry to one degree or another. And there's been like for example, moringa is this incredible plant which has got 96 nutrients, and there's actually been studies which have shown that for inflammation, moringa works as good or better than the pharmaceutical drugs do to reduce inflammation. And so that's a big issue for the pharmaceutical companies, right? And so moringa was actually banned in Australia for 5 years or something, and only was allowed recently. And the reason why they banned it
It's
was
a
because
tree, right? It's the with the green
exactly
leaves.
it's subtropical
Oh my
tree.
god! Yeah,
Exactly,
and I've came across it in Indonesia.
it's a
It's so
beautiful tree.
tasty, and it's
Yeah,
super healthy. Yeah, superfood clearly.
but, but what they
But it
did
was
was
forbidden. How crazy! Because it's like a tree. You can't. How can you forbid a tree to grow?
they did a study, and in that study they gave rats 200 times the dosage. So whatever 200 times the dosage of what, so a human would have a teaspoon, they'd force feed the rat 200 teaspoons, right? Like
Gee.
the equivalent for a human. And then there were some rats that had their fetus aborted, so they couldn't have their babies. And so they used that to say that it was dangerous and that it wasn't
Yeah,
allowed to be sold.
crazy.
It's
Yeah.
wild. But yeah, so I think getting back to what you said about challenges, I think there's always been challenges and there's still challenges. But I think I always just wanted to, I just always thought about like, what's the next step? Like, I never really had business plans. I never really had like, mentor. Like, I've done a few like one-off 1 hour sessions with mentors about certain things. But like, I've never really had people to like guide me. I've just kind of gone, take one step in front of the other. Just like, what's the next step? Take the next step. And there'd be times when things would be bad. And like I heard someone say the other day on a business podcast, you'll love your business one third of the time, you'll hate it one third of the time, and the other third you'll be indifferent. And I think that's true. I think that's actually true. That's actually accurate. But I don't know. There's been some really hard times, and I think one of the things I've done is like not take on debt, because I think once you take on debt, I think that takes away a lot of the fun of it and puts a lot of pressure on. And I don't like when people say I'm starting a business, I'm gonna sell my family house and use that money to start the business. Start the business with no money, and make sure it works first before you like start investing and whatever. Because most businesses don't make it. Most businesses do fail. And so one thing that I've always been really adamant about was not taking on any debt. So I don't owe anybody anything. So if the business falls apart tomorrow, I can walk away and I don't owe anybody anything, and they can't take my house and things like that. And then the other thing is just try like having some cash in the bank, so that like when we have a bad day or a bad week, I don't have to go like, how am I going to pay these invoices? Like, I don't like, I hated that feeling. I had that feeling for like 7 years or something. And I hated that feeling of like not having enough money to pay the bills. And so I've always just made sure that we have more than enough cash, so that if we have a bad year, we've still got enough money to be able to pay our bills and always try to pay invoices as quickly as possible, because again, that's debt. That's owing money to people. So try to not owe anybody anything, and have money put aside for a rainy day, is the way we say it in Australia, is like, have money
Yeah.
for a rainy day. And yeah, but I mean, there's still challenges. I think when you're doing the business by yourself, I think the challenge is that you have to do everything, and you have to do all the stuff you don't like, and you have to, like you said before, you have to be the accountant, and you have to be the marketing person, and you have to be the logistics person. You have to do all those kind of roles, and you have to do it yourself. And then as you get bigger, you can start bringing people in to do the stuff that you don't want to do or you're not very good at. But then you have to manage those people. When you have issues with those people, and headaches with people not showing up, and people having a bad attitude, and people like not doing their job properly, and people, whatever it is. And so like managing people is like, in some ways it's harder, because although you don't have to do the jobs you don't want to do, you have to manage other people's emotions and feelings and childhood trauma and whatever else. Like, so I think there's always challenges in business. I don't think it ever ends, but I think you just try and surround yourself with good people and get rid of the bad people as quickly as possible, and take yourself, like, as soon as you can afford to, bring on people who can do the parts of the business that you don't want to do or you're not good at. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, business is, it's constant challenges and it's constant obstacles and issues, and you just got to try. Like, I try really hard not to stress about things and not to get upset about things, and just to go, it's just part of the game. We've got enough money to pay our bills and just move on.
This podcast is brought to you by the Garden of Your Dreams Masterclass. Are you struggling with finding the right tools and tricks for your garden? Are you lacking the confidence to be a self-sufficient gardener? Do you sometimes get overwhelmed by the lack of knowledge and time you have to actually do gardening? Then the Garden of Your Dreams Masterclass is for you.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's some really good advice. I like, just like, there's no secret to it, or there's not like, oh, you have to do this. It's just like one step in front of the next, and
Yeah,
then keep going.
and just to try to enjoy it. Like, I think there's a big problem in our modern society with people thinking that buying stuff that they don't need is going to make them happy. And so I think a
Mm.
lot of people are spending more money than they make. And I think that creates a massive issue. And then you need credit cards and debt and all kinds of things to be able to sustain your lifestyle. It doesn't make you happy. I think you're much better off finding ways to make you happy that don't cost a lot of money, and then saving the money that you make, because every dollar saved is one less dollar you have to make tomorrow. And
Mm.
so I kind of realized, a long time ago, that buying stuff wasn't going to make me money. It wasn't going to make me happy. And like, I drove an old van until like 1.5 years ago. Like, I had this old van and it was worth $400 because I put tires on it that cost $400. Like, the van was worth nothing, but I just drove it because I didn't want to have to, like, get the new car. Not that I had to take out a loan to get the car, but you get the car and then you have to look after it and you have to be very careful with it. And someone going to scratch it, and I have to keep it clean, and you have to get it serviced properly. And it creates all this like dramas that I don't need. I'd rather put that energy towards like my business and growing food, and I
I
think
love that.
I think people should think more about the brain energy that they use towards things, and what
Mm.
the real cost of that is. It's not just like the physical energy of like going for a run. It's like the energy of having to deal with crap that doesn't push you towards your goals, and try to
Yeah, yeah.
minimize that as much as possible, and go like, where do I want to get to? Okay, I want to build this business that helps people all over the world. Okay, I'm not gonna waste time on thinking about this or that or this new couch or whatever else, because it takes me away from having energy towards working on where it is I want to go.
Mm. Yeah, that's very beautiful. You center your energy on, and you pinpoint it on what you want to achieve, and go for that, and then have as little distractions as possible. It
Yeah,
sounds
and
like.
I think like, for example, with the business one, like, I heard some really good advice the other day when someone said, as soon as the business can afford it, get somebody else to do the customer service.
Mm.
Why? Because the customer service, even if we send out, I don't know, maybe like 8,000 orders a month or something. But like, if you send out 8,000 orders, you're going to have problems with 20 orders. It's not possible not to. But those are the people that send all the emails and call all the time. Where's my order? You lost my order. My order arrived broken. You're awful. All these things. And
Yeah.
it makes you feel like your business is rubbish, because
Mm.
all you do all day is hear people talking about how bad it is, because you don't hear from the 4,980 people who had this incredible experience. You only hear from the people, or you mostly hear from the people who had a bad experience. And so it stuffs with your head a bit, because you start to think like, maybe my products aren't that good, and maybe like, my systems are good and my business is good, and I should just shut it all down, and it screws with your head. So I think
Oh yeah.
having somebody else to do if you're selling like a product, having someone else to do the customer service is amazing, because they're not like connected with it in the same way that you are as a business owner, and you can focus on those other thousands of people and making sure they have a good experience without thinking about these 4 or 5 or 10 or 20 people who had a bad experience. And
Mm.
because again, that's like, there's things to learn from that, of course. And our whole thing is about someone has a bad experience. That's great because now we have a good opportunity to show them how awesome we are. So
Yeah.
like someone has a bad experience, the order does something gets lost or whatever. We send them the new one plus a free gift, and we go above and beyond to make sure we solve the problem quickly and solve it beyond their expectations. But
Mm.
and then that person turns around and goes from someone who was angry to someone who goes, wow, I can trust these guys. They're really good. And you take a negative and you turn it into a positive. But
Yeah.
like as a business owner, you don't want to be focused on those few people. You want to focus on the thousands of people and how do you reach more people and how do you get to more people and how do you give those more people an amazing experience rather than the 1% or 0.5% or 0.1%, whatever it is, who have a bad experience.
It's very interesting that you put it in that way because somehow I think we as humans, we are wired, or that's what I heard even, that we are wired for bad news.
Yeah,
As we were like living in the bush, we had to be like, oh shit, there's a lion. We have to be like, oh, have a
exactly.
little shock and have that stress
Yeah,
and be focused on the bad things more than the good things. But
yeah,
now we're not no longer in the bush as
yeah.
much. Well, we're going for other reasons now
And,
to
well, and
enjoy it.
exactly.
And
And it's the same with our ads. Like I don't like. There's a lot of ads where I'm talking about the products and whatever, and like I don't read the comments on the ads because
oh yeah,
like
I was gonna say,
because I don't want to see like people,
yeah,
negative
people
stuff and like how my eyes look weird, whatever it is. Like I don't want to like I don't need to see that those negative things. So someone else does that. But I think humans are hardwired to take notice of the negative because it's a survival trait when we were living in the Amazon. But I
yes.
think like, and I think to that, I think I that like if we don't have challenges in our lives, if I think we create challenges in our lives, and I
Mm,
think when we're bored, we look for things to make complicated and we look for things to create issues out of because we've always like humans are happiest during times of struggle. You hear about like during the war time when everyone's working together and there's rations and people talk about how that was like where everyone was the happiest, because they're working together towards a common goal, and they're also like appreciating their life because you don't know if you're going to wake up tomorrow. And so like
interesting.
I think that like life now is so easy. Modern day life is so easy comparative to the rest of, human history, that we need to create challenges for ourselves. Otherwise, our subconscious will create the challenges in our
Mm,
relationships and our business and our own minds and everything. So like I'm very much about doing cold plunges and doing like sauna and doing martial arts and all that kind of stuff because I want to make sure that like I choose the challenges in my life, not my subconscious chooses the challenges in my relationships or in my business or whatever it is. And so I think it's really important to like to challenge yourself. I think especially for men, I think it's really important to challenge yourself every day and create struggles for yourself in a controlled environment, like a
mm,
5-degree water for 5 minutes. Like I think that is a really healthy way to then put everything else in perspective. And I think when you do a cold plunge and you don't want to do it and it's freezing and you do it anyway, afterwards you feel so good and everything comes into it, puts things in perspective a bit more. And you go, that problem with the business isn't such a big deal. I can deal with that. I've just like
mm.
almost got pneumonia. I could deal with that business problem much better.
Wow, it's a very interesting way of you putting it. Why creating, like, I knew for a certain to a certain extent, like when you consciously create certain challenges, the bigger other challenges become easier.
Yeah.
So if you do that cold plunge, it just becomes easier to take care of something that is uncomfortable in the business. But I never thought of, like, if you even don't do it, then you subconsciously create other challenges in your life. So wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, because
Now,
we're designed for struggle. Like we're designed for survival. And if we and when we live in a situation where we don't have to think about survival, that then creates implications in our own minds.
wow, very interesting. And then doing it consciously is the best way, because then you don't have to be completely
Yeah,
overwhelmed and constantly in stress.
yeah.
So Yeah, I think that's a great way you've put it. Now let's talk a bit more about your personal journey. As you said, you're growing your own food. You're sitting in a beautiful environment. For those people who are watching on YouTube, you can watch the interview. It looks like you're sitting in a beautiful environment as the sun is going down there in Australia.
Yeah.
Tell me more about your garden experience, what you're doing, and how that's been going on.
So around the same time when I was traveling around India, like when I was 19, 20, I was thinking a lot about this idea of like we go and get a job, we make money, and then we give that money to someone else to grow our food for us or to provide us with food. And I was thinking about like, why can't I just, instead of doing the job I don't like to make money to grow food, just cut out the middle part and just grow the food myself? And that seemed like such a logical idea to me to like just grow the food myself. And so I had no experience with farming. No one in my family has ever done any kind of, maybe growing some flowers, like no farming whatsoever. But I was really interested in this idea of like self-sustainability and being self-sufficient and growing food and being connected with the food that I was eating. And so I was living in the city at the time, and I decided I was going to start composting. So I had like a bucket on the balcony and some plants, and it was like a massive disaster, and it stunk so bad. I didn't have any air, and it was a disaster. But like the next year I got a little bit better, and the next year I got a little bit better and a little bit better. And my dream was always to like live on land and have animals and grow my own food. And I just always thought like there's such a disconnect between the food we eat and how it's grown. And I think when you can grow the food and then eat it yourself, you feel so much more connected to the food you're growing. And it's also a
Mm.
really good excuse to be like in nature all the time with all the insects and like all the animals and like and connected with the soil and the food you're growing and the food you're eating. And so I still like I've been growing food now for 20 years, and
Wow.
it still blows my mind that like a little seed has 100 kilos of food trapped inside. Like that's crazy to me. Like a little pumpkin seed, there's 100 kilos of food inside that little seed. That's the same
Yeah,
size as my nail. Like that's a
it's
miracle.
massive.
That's a
Yeah.
miracle. And that's what I try to teach my son as well. Is like you know, don't worry about Santa. Like that's proper magic, like that's real magic in nature, in life. And like, so I was
I
always,
exactly had that one of my earliest memories as a child was exactly that. Like I was just mind blown. Like how on earth is this possible when you have a tiny seed and you put it in the soil, it can grow massive crops or even in some cases like a massive tree. Like how on earth is that possible? That's exactly the biggest magic on this planet. Yeah.
it's wild. And I think that like has really helped with the business as well, because I understood that like if the food is not grown, or the mushrooms or whatever it is, if it's not grown in good quality soil, if it's
Mhm.
grown in soil which is full of chemicals and which has been tilled a lot or whatever, then the food can't be high nutrients, because it doesn't have,
No.
if the nutrients aren't in the soil, the plant can't get the nutrients. And if the
No.
mushrooms are growing in pollution with heavy metals, whatever, they're going to absorb that, and you're going to be eating that when you eat the mushroom. So I had this, from growing food, I had this deep appreciation for like high quality soil and high quality growing of food. And so everything we do is
Wow.
organic, it's certified organic, and we try to do Australian grown, because in Australia you can grow stuff without pollution, without heavy metals, with clean water. And so I know that if it's grown in Australia, it's going to be high quality and safe to consume. And so
Wow.
I've thought a lot about like, because you like, it's probably cheaper to grow the food to buy the food from the supermarket. When you think about the
Yeah.
time and the money and the losses you have and the seeds and the water and everything to grow it, it's so, you can go and buy that pumpkin for $4 from the supermarket. And there's so much work and time involved in growing it. So like, to grow it yourself, you have to be growing something which is so much better than what you get in the supermarket. And that's possible just by having really good organic matter in your soil, and having like not using chemicals, and growing the heirloom varieties that don't store very well for supermarkets but have all these incredible nutrients in them, and eating stuff fresh. Like I saw a study, I saw a study last year where they were looking at like one apple in the 1950s, how much nutrients it had in it, nutrients, vitamins, and comparing
Mm,
it to today. And you would have to have 16 apples today to get the same
mm.
amount of nutrients you would have gotten in the 1950s from one apple.
Yeah, it's crazy. With oranges, it's 30 to 1. So today you need to eat 30 oranges to get one, yeah, 50, 60 years
And,
ago.
and why is that? It's because they're growing it in poor quality soil where there's not a lot of organic matter, and so the plants can't take the nutrients. They till it every year, which kills all the good fungi, all the good microbes in the soil, and all the good fungi and all the good stuff that helps to give the food its nutrients. And then they're storing it for 6 months or 12 months before they sell it to you. And they've inbred it over and over again in order to make it store well and look nice on a shelf, not for the nutrient quality. And so by
Mm,
growing it yourself, you can kind of like get back to eating high nutrient food fresh off the tree,
yes.
or just harvesting the plant. And I try to encourage everybody to grow themselves. Like I think growing food yourself is like, makes you that little bit more self-sufficient, but also makes you more connected to your food, more appreciative of your food, and you know exactly what's gone into it. You don't have to, there's no chemicals in it because you've grown it yourself. And that's also the reason why for most of our products, we use freeze drying. So like everybody else, when they sell like ashwagandha root or moringa or the mushrooms, they just spray dry it or sun dry it. But when you dry anything, you have nutrient loss during the drying process, except when
Mm,
you use freeze drying, because freeze
no.
drying takes let's say the lion's mane mushroom, and it freezes it to negative 230 degrees in like less than a second. So there's
Wow.
no so it's dried before there's even any nutrient loss can occur, or very minimal nutrient loss. And there's actually scientific studies that have actually looked at freeze drying compared to other drying processes, and they've gone, yeah, actually freeze drying is better than all the other drying processes, and it's almost nutritionally equivalent to eating the food fresh. So I always say
Wow.
to people, like, the best thing is to have fresh, but if you can't have fresh, freeze dried is the next best.
Wow.
And so that's why we do the products freeze dried, and it costs a fortune. Like to spray dry is like, if spray drying's $1, freeze drying $7. Like
Mm,
it's the cost is like is phenomenal. It's way more expensive. So nobody else does it because it's too expensive and it reduces their profit margins. But I'm
mm,
like, I don't care. I just want to sell the highest quality product. That's it.
yeah.
And like some people will buy, and so it's more expensive than everyone else, a little bit more expensive. And some people will go, I'm just going to buy the cheap stuff, and that's okay. They're not the right customer for us. But a lot of people go, actually, no, I'm happy spending a little bit more to get a much better quality product. And
Mm,
that's why I think the business has done so good, is because people like me didn't want to eat crappy health foods. You might as well just not have them, rather than have poor quality. And so we've been able to resonate with people like that all over the world, and people appreciate having really high quality stuff, and they trust what we do. And so we've got customers who have placed more than 100 orders with us. That
wow.
one customer, because they've been with us for 6 years or 7 years, and like they order regularly. And we've got 50 amazing superfoods, and so they're always trying new things and getting refills and buying for friends and family. And like, that's something that I love, is that like there's a lot of people out there that really appreciate what we do.
That's amazing. And I love the way you link it to growing your own food. And I like what you said about the fact that gardening or growing your own food is like the best way to connect with nature. I'm not sure if that's
Yeah,
exactly what you said, but something in that lines like, yeah, you can walk in nature and it's great and you should do it, or you can make your hands dirty and be directly connected with nature, and
yeah,
scientifically proven as well. As you said, there's microorganisms in the soil. We
yeah,
can absorb them through our skin with our hands.
yes,
So generally, when you garden, you always feel better. And I had
yeah.
someone else saying it's actually the grandmother of my cousin who
Mm.
said that when you have problems in your life, go and work in your garden, and you'll find some of your answers, if
What's
not most.
what's that quote about, like, the sickness in society can be directly contributed to our disconnect to nature?
Oh yeah,
Like
totally.
we're so disconnected from nature that, like, it's no wonder that there's so much mental illness and so many people who are like struggling with anxiety and with everything else. And like, you go outside and you know this comedian Bill Hicks from the '90s, from the '80s and '90s. He
No,
was
no.
he was amazing. He used to get booed off stage because he didn't care and he just said everything. But he was
I'll look
incredible.
them
You
up.
should go back and listen to his stuff. But he talks about how like he'll watch the news and on the news it'll be like famine, disease, murder, poverty, death, all this stuff. And then he looks outside and he just hears the crickets, going, choo, 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 choo. He's like, where's it all happening? It's all good here. And it's that whole thing of like, we can get so caught up in our own minds and all the negativity of the world and all the trouble that's going on around us. But like once you step into nature, you realize there's this whole world going on that's got nothing to do with that whatsoever. And like, yeah, and I think I think if growing a little bit of food can help people connect more with what they put in their bodies and connect more with nature, I think that's amazing. I think that's time well spent.
I agree, and then add a few high quality supplements that are freeze dried, then you'll have an even better life. I love that.
Yeah.
So, Justin, we're getting towards the end of the interview. I'd still love to ask for you what is your single best piece of advice for people that are looking to either start their business, have started their business, and they want to do something good for the environment? Because that's what this podcast is about. And you're an obvious example of how you can do good in business and do something good for the planet.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to hear your final and most important piece of advice.
Um, I think that maybe it's hard to pick one, but I think
You
one
have
thing
to choose.
I think one thing would be like I think in business, I think people often go like, I have all these values as an individual. I'm not going to rip anyone off and I'm going to be honest and I'm going to have integrity and all this stuff. But in business, I don't have to worry about all that because business is cutthroat and you have to just win at all costs. And I think that's a bit silly. I think what we need to realize as individuals is there's more important things than money, like our reputation and our integrity. And I think you need to be able to go to bed at night feeling like you're happy with who you are and what you're contributing to the world and what you're doing in the world. And that's more important than the money. Because I think the money's going to come and money's going to go. But like your integrity and your reputation is like, it only takes 1 second to destroy that. And so I think it's really important to like keep your morals and your values in your business that you have in your private life. So like for me, I wouldn't take any low quality like mushrooms that were grown in a dodgy way from overseas. So I don't sell that. I could make a
Mm,
lot more money, but I don't sell that because I wouldn't feel comfortable with it and I wouldn't feel comfortable with myself. So I don't do it. So use your gut instinct and your moral instinct and your morals in business like you do in life. But like, I think be prepared to take the long haul with the business. Like, understand that it could take you 20 years to get to wherever it is you want to get to. So you need to learn. You need to really believe in what you're doing and be passionate about it, and enjoy the process along the way. And don't think like, of I'm not making $10 million a year yet. Think like I'm so much further ahead than I was a week ago or a month ago or a year ago. Just keep moving forward, like we said at the start. And I think it's the same in the personal life as well. Like I think, we have this idea of becoming these, incredible, perfect humans, and I
mhm.
don't that never happens. Just keep moving forward and keep growing. And if you can turn around and go like, look at look at yourself from a year ago and go, wow, I've grown so much. That's a win. That's I think the scariest thing would be not growing at all. And I think with business as well, people often say to me like, most people have said to me, how come you're still so passionate about your business? Like I thought you would have, be over it by now because the business is being successful. But I don't think that's I think everything's always changing. You look at nature and you look at us as animals, and everything in the world is constantly in a state of change. And so a business is the same. And so a business is either growing or it's dying. There's no such thing as staying the same. And
Mm,
so I'm always thinking about like how to grow the business and how to make it better and how to reach more people. Because if we didn't do that, then our competitors would be, taking over and we'd be getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so
mm,
I think I don't think you never arrive, you never get there. It's just a constant thing. Like 20 years ago, I was thinking about, okay, how can I get the business a little bit better today? How can I improve our systems a little bit? And I'm still thinking that same way today. How do I like make these things a little bit better than what they were yesterday for our customers and also for our business profitability and for all that kind of stuff? Like, how can I just improve a little bit day to day? Because there's no journey, it's yeah, I mean, there's no destination.
Mm.
You're not trying to get, there's nowhere to get to. It's just about, it's the journey of improving and getting better all the time as individuals and also as business owners.
Wow, I love that. That's a really good piece of advice to not like yeah, there's only such and such, like there's only 24 hours in a day, and we
Yeah,
also need to get some sleep, so you can only focus on a certain amount of things. But then if you keep doing it daily, add it on top of it, tack,
yeah.
eventually it'll add up. And that's, yeah,
And,
there's
uh,
like this.
And the other thing I want to say to you as well is, I like, because I love numbers and I love mathematics and accounting. I used to always think it's all about making your business profitable. The most important thing is to make sure it's profitable and keep costs down and make it's all about the numbers. But actually, that's not true. It's more important than the numbers is the marketing and reaching the customers, because if you don't have customers, then the numbers don't matter. And it's just the most important thing is reaching customers. So I think every day it's very easy, especially when you're like running the business by yourself, it's very easy to spend your day working on, a new flyer and a new thing for the website and like all these little things you have to do. But most important is you need to do something every day that gets you more customers.
Mm,
That's the most important thing. And then once you've done that, work out what that is. What can I do today that's going to get me more customers, and do that, and then do all the other stuff afterwards. Because it's really easy to get distracted with all the other things you have to do and not focus on the customers. And then your business just can't ever get anywhere because you don't have the customer base.
oh yeah, that's this kind of boom and bust cycle.
Yeah.
um, that honestly I've been going through it in like, we add a few new clients and then you have to like focus on delivery, and you kind of stop promoting, or you stop
Yeah.
reaching out to people, and then you deliver the work, and then it's like, oh shit, we need new clients to keep going.
Yeah.
So I
And
love that every day, even if it's just a small thing
and and
to
it and it could even be, doing some posts on social media about the job you're currently doing, because that's
Mm.
that's reaching new customers.
Oh
That's
yeah,
part of it, but
that's
it's just
amazing.
about being able to market your business and get the word out there to the right people at the right time, whatever that means. And that could be posting on social media, it can be your book, it can be, all kinds of different things. But it's just, you've got to always be thinking, how do I get more customers? How do I get to my customers and cut through the noise? Because without that, nothing else matters. And if you have that, you can make everything else work.
Mm. Well, beautiful. Well, Justin, on that note, I think we're going to end here. So thank you very much for all your wisdom and sharing all your insights of how you've grown your own business. And also, like I said, it's so amazing to see how you can build a good business, make good amounts of money, and then still be able to live a beautiful life and support reforestation now, specifically in Australia.
Yeah.
So again, congratulations and thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, we ship our superfoods worldwide. So if anyone wants to get some high quality Australian grown mushrooms and superfoods, they can just go to forestsuperfoods.com.au or forestsuperfoods.com, and yeah, we send worldwide.
Yes, so people can reach out to you. Also, you're active on most social media platforms to follow your journey.
Yeah, so we're on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and people, if they want advice or they want to reach out to me specifically, they can reach me on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. So we'll put that in the show notes. So again, Justin, thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.